All right, welcome to the video that's going to walk you through how I bought my first condo at 22 years old. Now, for some background, I had just graduated in May of 2021, and then the buying process started in October. So I had the privilege of living with my parents for about 6 months and saving up to then be able to have the down payment and get into my first condo. My first step was figuring out how much I could afford. Now, I did this prior to going to a lender because lenders will unfortunately approve you for much more than you probably should spend on your monthly mortgage and insurance and taxes and utilities and stuff. So do your own budget first, which we're about to break down based on my starting salary, and then we'll go into the next steps. And one last thing to note before we dive into my numbers is these numbers aren't going to be quite indicative of my entire financial picture because I'd be moving in with my wife. So her entire salary and all her bonuses, we essentially pretended didn't exist. Every paycheck that came in, we just funneled away into our E-Trade account, and that's how we were able to save up while living off of my salary. It's basically a cheat code, especially when you have no kids. So I'd highly recommend it, I guess. But let's dive into my numbers. Upon graduating in 2021, my monthly income after taxes, 401k contribution, and insurance was $4,200 a month. Now, that was a ton of money to me at the time, considering just a few months ago I was a broke college student. Now, between my wife and I, we graduated with about $60,000 of student loan debt, so that probably would have been around $600 a month. Now, the reason I'm actually not going to include this is because the government deferred payments for almost 2 years after we graduated, so it was never really a factor into my budget because by the time it was due, we actually had already just paid it all off. We were both lucky enough to not have any car payments, but our car insurance was $140 a month. And for basic living, again, we were used to being broke college kids, so we set aside $1,500 a month to live off of, and that was plenty at the time when we were both living with our parents. So that left us with $2,560 a month that we could use towards a mortgage. Now, we obviously didn't want to use all of that because we knew our expenses were going to go up. So the number that we came up with that we were comfortable spending a month was $2,000 or around it. Sticking to this plan would allow us to funnel all of my wife's income into E-Trade. So that way, when we eventually moved out, we would have enough money saved up to be able to purchase another condo without having to sell the first one. Now that I had a general view of my finances and what I was comfortable spending a month on the mortgage and utilities, step 2 is to go to Redfin to see if there's even anything that fits that criteria that I just established in step 1. All right, let's head into the app and see what we can find. I want to be somewhat close to Washington, D.C., but I know if I'm too close, I'll be priced out. So we're going to look right outside. We also need to humble ourselves and get rid of those $1 million listings because we are not in that tax bracket yet. So we're going to look between $200,000 and $300,000. We're looking for a 1 to 2 bedroom with either 1 or 2 baths. All right, looks like we have a few hits, so let's go ahead and look at that cheaper one at $215,000. Now you have to remember when looking for your first condo that will eventually be a rental property, you're not going for your dream home. So we want something with good bones. That kitchen is not great, but it looks like it was well kept, and a few new appliances, maybe some paint would really spruce up the place. Installing a new shower head, new faucets, some updated paint really goes a long way in increasing value. Looks like it also has a nice little outdoor area. Diving into the numbers, $215,000 is a great price for being that close to the city, and $329,000 a month for HOA is honestly not that bad. Here's what we would be looking at with only a 3% down payment. That is very doable for a first-time home purchase. So we're looking at about $2,000 a month. Now, if you want to hurt yourself, you can see what it would be at only 3% interest rate. And yeah, that hurts. So let's head back to reality at 6.5% and see if we can still make it work with today's interest rate. Heading over to the down payment of 3% isn't too bad. Now, as a buffer, I like to add an additional 3% to cover closing costs. Now, sometimes they'll be less, but 3% to be safe. Now, you'll see if we go all the way up to 20% down payment and there's no PMI, our monthly is significantly less. But most college graduates don't have 45 grand sitting around. All right, that property is not too bad. Looks like it fits our criteria financially and has some good sweat equity opportunities. So we're going to take that information and head to step 3. Now, the goal is for it to look a little something like this from my first condo. Now that I've looked in the area that I want to buy and there are a few things that I'd be interested in, this is when you then take that information to a realtor. Getting a real estate agent is super easy. Your best bet is to tap into your own network. So ask your parents, do they have any friends or people that they trust who are real estate agents who would be willing to walk you through purchasing your first home? Most of them are super nice and they are willing to kind of teach you along the way. And this is super important because it's your very first time. So try and soak in as much knowledge from them as possible. Because eventually, at least in my scenario, the second time I bought a place, so the second condo I bought, I didn't use an agent because I was able to use that as leverage to lower the price point or get seller credits if the seller doesn't have to pay an agent on my behalf. But for your first time, definitely use an agent. It's just not worth the risk to try and do it yourself, at least the first time. So I used a friend of my in-laws, very nice lady. They told me not to buy. It's 2021, prices were at an all-time high, but rates were extremely low. Rates were at 3%. But put yourself in my shoes. I'm 22 years old. They're all telling me to just be patient, just to wait. Prices are at all-time high. If I listened to them, I would have missed out on arguably the best investment I've ever made in my life. I bought for $250. It's currently worth 300 something. I have $70,000 of equity, and it's now my first rental property that's cash flowing and will probably pay for my kids' colleges. So trust your gut. When the numbers work and you're comfortable with it, just do it. Step 3 is arguably the most fun one because you haven't committed to anything yet, and you get to go to showings, you get to go to listings, you get to go see those beautiful places that you've already seen on Redfin that you've fallen in love with, and then since you're using a realtor, they can also tap into their network for houses that are off market. So super exciting time being a first-time home buyer, and then once you've found the place that you love, in which case I found a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo. It was 900 square feet. It was plenty for me at the time. I then contacted a lender to get a pre-approval and make sure that all the calculations I did in step 1 were true and I could actually get pre-approved to buy my first condo. So step 4 is getting that pre-approval letter from the lender. The lender will walk you through everything you need to know. Every document they need, they'll request, they'll send you a big list. They'll want pay stubs, W-2s, driver's license, all of that stuff. And if you haven't been employed for the past 2 or 3 years or whatever they need, you can give them your transcript. So you can be like, I don't have past work history, I was in school, and that will suffice. Step 5 is then getting that pre-approval letter, giving it to your realtor, and then they will submit that to the seller's agent on your behalf. And that's when the negotiation starts. Sometimes they'll accept your offer right off the bat. In my case, that didn't happen. I submitted an offer for $245. The list price was $255. They straight up said no. And I was like, well, can we counter? And my agent was like, yeah. So I then submitted another offer at $250 and that got accepted. So we're gonna now head over to the closing disclosure to break down the numbers of my first condo so you have a better idea of what some of the legal documents actually look like.
Closing disclosure is issued to you by your lender once your offer has been accepted by the seller. As I said earlier, the purchase price was $250,000 with 3% down of $7,500. My loan amount came out to $242,500. Now don't get confused with my interest rate also being 3%. It just so happens that's what it is. My monthly principal and interest was only around $1,000. Now don't get excited when you see that number because that does not include your escrow, your HOA, or any of your utilities. I used a conventional loan, and because I didn't put 20% down, I do have PMI, which is why you'll see years 10 through 30 a little cheaper because PMI will have fallen off. Now, you do not want to wait that long to get PMI off. Because the property is going to appreciate over time, once you hit 20 to 25% equity, depending on who your lender is, you can submit a letter to them to ask for PMI to be removed. And lastly, at the bottom is my cash to close of around 12.5 grand. And that's just the closing costs plus the remaining balance of my down payment that I owe, since I already paid a portion of it earlier, which is known as the earnest money deposit. I'll let Google explain that to you.
And now the last thing to do is to work with the title company who will then issue the final documents such as the note, the deed, pretty much everything you need to be on record at the courthouse that you are now the owner of your new property. A settlement date will be established and you'll go and sign, and they'll usually take a picture with you. Here's mine. At closing, after you sign, you get your keys, and that's it. You then get to head to your place and go in for the first time as an owner. Super exciting. I was so pumped. And that's it. That's how I bought my first condo. Now everyone will have their own experience, but hopefully you at least have a general guide map on how to do it yourself. Now, all these videos that I post are just videos that I wish I had when I was 18. So there's no real rhyme or reason to the order or what I post. It's just, if I think of something that would be helpful to my younger self, I'll make a video on it. So remember that everyone's dealt a different hand, and you can't compare yourself to others, but what you can do is you can try and be the best version of yourself. You can try and learn where you can, and take the leap of faith. Now, 2024 is unfortunately a much more difficult time to buy in. I'm 25, my salary's grown exponentially, and I'm still having trouble getting into even a townhouse because they're like $800,000 now, which is just crazy where I'm from. I'm in Virginia. Yeah, see you guys next time.